Hi, this is Rahman Sheikh. Welcome to Fortnightly Railway Transportation Systems podcast. I am the host and railway systems specialist working in this industry for 24 years and counting. This podcast is primarily focused on railway experts who have vast amount of experience and contributed greatly to this amazing industry. This is not a technical seminar but focuses on feel good stories, individual journeys, their success and failures, motivating younger generation to kickstart their career in railways and creating a sense of pride for the railway people who devoted their lives on the most environment friendly public transportation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Norman Forde, a seasoned leader in the transportation industry, joining us as a guest for our Railway Transportation Systems podcast. With over 3 decades of both domestic and international experience, Norman brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to our discussion. As a senior executive and project manager, Norman has demonstrated exceptional interpersonal skills and a remarkable ability to communicate effectively across diverse teams. Throughout his career, Norman has overseen multi-million-dollar programs specializing in rolling stock projects from conception to completion. His track record of winning business and delivering results is a testament to his dedication and proficiency in project management. Notably, he has provided oversight for significant projects under the Federal Transit Administration and Federal Railroad Administration, earning recognition for his contributions to high-speed rail transportation. Currently serving as the Vice President Market Leader for Facilities and Fleet at Mott MacDonald, Norman continues to play a pivotal role in shaping the transportation landscape. His involvement in industry organizations such as American Public Transportation Association, where he serves as a Vice Chair of the Press Policy and Planning Committee, further exemplifies his commitment to advancing the field. With his extensive experience and deep understanding of railway systems, Norman Forde is sure to enrich our discussion and provide invaluable insights into the intricacies of modern transportation. Please join me in welcoming him to our pod. Hi, Norman. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I'm very humbled to be here.
Likewise, let's kick off with some interesting insights and help us learn from your knowledge and experience. What sparked your interest in the transportation industry, particularly in the railway systems?
Yeah, my interest was sparked at a very, very young age. I grew up in a place called Langley, which is in Berkshire in England. So I'm from the UK originally, and I lived very close to a railway line, Langley Station, and also a bus terminus. So my parents immigrated from Barbados to England, and we were a one-car family. And so didn't really think a lot of that at the time because I think that was very normal. But I really great times with my mother, walking down to the train station and getting on the train, probably from the age of 4 or 5. I can remember getting on the train and going into the city, even London at times, exploring museums. And so public transport as a child was a very natural thing for me to participate in. And I was always kind of fascinated by big machinery, how the wheels went round, how the train was air conditioned at times, and sometimes it wasn't in England. And then also just, fascinated by our mode of getting from one place to another. So I think coming from Europe, very much a social thing, transportation was kind of in my blood from a very young age.
Wow, great story. Very, very Bollywood style story. I like it. Throughout your career, you have held various leadership positions in both private and public sectors. How has this diverse experience shaped your approach to managing railway projects?
Yeah, I feel very, very lucky that I've had the opportunity to work both in the private sector and in the public sector. My public sector experience came fairly late in my career, just in the last couple of years when I was working for Amtrack. But I think you have to accept that in the public sector, things do move a little slower. The resources aren't always as readily available as they are in the private sector. But some of that slowness actually helps in that planning phase sometimes. So I think for me personally, it's kind of blending the dynamic private sector with the public sector has really helped my thought process because I can definitely see the benefits of planning over a long period of time, but then I'm kind of an impatient person and I like to get the execution done and get projects closed out. So I think it's a combination of those two things that I do think it's really important that we understand that the planning process really does need to be thorough and take place. And here in the US, sometimes we have to go through things like environmental procedures. So that will take time to get through the environmental approvals. But I do think as a project manager, you're really focused on the end goal. And so with the private sector, I certainly have been able to pivot very quickly, certainly quicker than in the public sector. So yeah, I think the combination of the two has been really helpful to me and shaped my approach to projects. But I would always say, don't underestimate that planning phase, because if we don't plan properly, then our execution is not going to be very successful.
Yeah, I do agree, Norman. Amtrack, you mentioned about it. So did you work closely with Andy Byford?
I did, and I've heard your previous podcasts with my friend Train Daddy, and ironically, we actually don't live that far apart now because we're both in Florida. So I've seen quite a lot of Andy since I left Amtrack as well. So yeah, good people. It's always great to work with good people who've got that international experience under their belt.
Yeah, great personality. I really loved talking to him. Could you also share some insights into the challenges and opportunities you have encountered while overseeing this multi-million-dollar program in the transportation sector?
Yeah, I think I'm always the ultimate optimist. So I always like to think, the challenges are also opportunities. But I think that it's very important when you are faced with these mega projects that, first of all, we understand this is not easy work. I think sometimes people underestimate how challenging some of these mega projects can be. But for me personally, I think stakeholder agreements have been really important in engaging people at all levels in the process. I have to say that in the private sector, sometimes you don't always realize just how many people you might be impacting in a project. So it is good to step back and get all of the opinions and all of the views of the people that you're trying to engage in a program. I think it goes much better that way when you've got a lot more consensus across the board. I think we've definitely had a better understanding of schedule these days and how important schedule is and how important it is to be able to manage and maintain schedule. And we've got a lot more tools in our toolbox. But I also would say that, at the end of the day, it's people that make these things happen. And so I'm very focused on the people management aspect of a project as well. And I think with good people, subject matter experts, and understanding of individuals' differences and being empathetic to those are always going to make projects go well. So yeah, we got all these tools in our toolbox, but I think at the end of the day, we should never underestimate the importance of the people trying to get the work done and making sure as leaders that we support them with the resources that they need to get the job done.
Wow, great thoughts, Norman. I completely concur with you. As someone with extensive experience in rolling stock projects, and as you said, you have been in love with the trains from childhood, what are some key considerations in ensuring the successful execution of such projects from specification to completion?
Yeah, I'm going to be boring and go back to the people aspect of it, I'm sure, in the sense that, again, we're in a people world. We need to be very engaged with the people that are involved in our projects, make sure that they're enthusiastic, that they're inquisitive. I like to work with people who think outside of the box. I was very lucky in my career to start at GE. And I think one of the challenges that we always had in the early days of my career at GE was we were forced to think outside of the box. It was a very dynamic organization. You were constantly challenged with how can you do things differently? And so that's always been a good learning curve for me personally, and it's something I try to bring to the successful execution of projects. There are many times when we have to kind of think about what is a workaround in terms of an issue. Things don't always go the way that you want them to go. But I do think, good collaboration, good communication, just great relationships as we go through the project, whether it's, with the owner's rep, whoever we're representing. I could tell you a quick story that I got very early in my career from a very wise executive who once said to me when I went to him with a $70 million contract and said, I'd like you to sign this. And he said to me, what's the relationship with the client like? And I said, I thought it was excellent. And he said, great, then I'll sign it. And he said to me, I want you to understand understand that if you have a good relationship with a client, then we can get past anything contractual. But the minute that we all reach down to that contract in our bottom right-hand drawer, that's the day things are going wrong. So I've always been a believer that most of the time we can try and talk things out if we've got a good relationship with somebody, and we don't all have to go scurrying looking for the attorneys and the lawyers. We can collaborate and get things done.
Wow, really great advice. Given your involvement with the Federal Transit Administration and also this Federal Railroad Administration, technically I don't understand the difference between these two. However, what are the best practices you have observed in procurement and project management within the railway industry?
I think our federal partners have actually come up with some very good structure in terms of how to orchestrate projects. We've got some best practice documents in terms of procurement procedures, which can be helpful to all parties. They've seen it from the funding perspective all the way through to the end of the project. So some of their best practice procedures have been extremely helpful. I think as far as our federal partners are concerned, involving them early and often is really important. I mean, sometimes people look at government agencies as being, the challenge, but to be honest, if you make them partner in the process, they can be extremely helpful just because, they've seen it before. They've got some really good reference points in the past. But I think, one of the things that we constantly need to think about is how do we work as a team, both from the federal perspective, maybe the consultant, maybe the car builder. And so I think when you collaborate together, those projects are always going to go much better. I'm also a big fan of co-locating a team on a project. I think when you put everybody kind of, whether virtually or actually under the same roof, I think it really helps with the communication. We've kind of joked in the last year or so that we don't have the water cooler conversations that we used to have since COVID, because people are still working remotely. So I think just some of that casual conversation definitely helps. But I think that as far as kind of procedural things are concerned, our federal partners have been able to lay down some good guidelines for us in terms of best practice. I'm also a big advocate that when we finish a project, and we're not all good at this, and I'll admit that I'm not the best at this, but there's really a lot to be said for going back and just understanding what lessons did we learn from this. Because I think one of the challenges we always have with mega projects is that we don't always have a great reference point, It hasn't been done before in the past. So if you can document how the project went, some of the lessons learned, then I think that's really helpful for the next person who's going to struggle with those same issues, and perhaps we can make their struggle a little less.
Wow, great answer, Norman. Let's make it more interesting. As we just spoke about projects, federal government, funding, etc., let's talk about the most spoken or discussed topic in the world of railway today, which is high speed. So you have been actively involved in the high speed rail transportation, including serving as the co-chair of the scientific committee for the 9th World Congress in Tokyo, Japan. Wow. What are some lessons learned from your involvement in advancing high-speed rail initiatives?
Yeah, I was extremely honored to be apt as a representative at I think it was the 9th World Congress for high-speed rail in Japan. Just an amazing opportunity to go to Japan. Just an incredibly civilized culture that I really, really enjoyed. I'd got probably about 4 trips backwards and forwards during the planning of the World Congress. I think for me, one of the lessons learned was that, we all share the same problems, whether it be funding or schedule. But I think also one of the things for me that was just really interesting was the technology. And I think it's very important for all of us to be very open in terms of our thoughts when it comes to technology and how can we transfer that technology. And I'm happy to see now here in the States that we are potentially looking at sync and send technology for one of our high-speed rail routes here. So I think that just kind of opens everybody's minds. The Japanese definitely have a different approach to safety as well in terms of, they're very much into prevention as opposed to cure. So they have an incredible safety record. So I think there's definitely things for us to learn there. I'll always say that safety needs to be a big element of our projects as well as we go forward and shape what we want to do. But yes, my feelings on that experience were just, it opened my mind to the possibilities of what we could do, certainly here in North America in terms of high-speed rail. The frequency was incredible. If you've only got to wait 15, 20 minutes for the next train, I think we understand that people would like that convenience. I think the other thing I would say is that we as a public, as a nation, need to do a better job of advocating for high-speed rail here. So it shouldn't just be like the industry getting excited, but we as the industry need to get the public excited about high-speed rail. And so I think Japan, for me, just said, all possibilities are kind of endless. What do we need to do here to get something that is safe, sustainable, efficient, all the good things that society is looking for in terms of mobility.
Beautiful, Norman. I know that you did touch about technology and high speed, but in innovation space, what you're looking like in the innovation space in shaping the future of railway transportation systems, particularly in enhancing safety, efficiency, and sustainability. Can you add a bit more on this?
Yeah, I mean, I went to a high-speed rail conference here in DC a few weeks ago, and one of the statistics that kind of really grabbed me was also just the lack of fatalities in our world of high-speed rail. So when you consider that, we want to go out and build another highway here in the States, we want to keep laying more concrete. The deaths from our roads are incredible compared to the death toll with, say, something like a high-speed rail system. So, we can save lives by actually implementing more high-speed rail. And then obviously, we're not burning as many fossil fuels. We don't have as many cars on the road. The greenhouse gases, potentially can go down. And I think even from a kind of equity perspective, we can offer people the opportunity to be able to be more mobile. So, I think there's lots of things on that sustainability kind of matrix that we can attack through high-speed rail, just trying to make the world a little better for everybody and a little bit more mobile.
How do you see the evolving landscape of railway transportation, particularly in North America, especially in light of increasing this urbanization and the need for more sustainable mobility solutions?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about rail transportation, as I hope that comes across. High-speed rail is something that really does fascinate me across the globe. And like I said, I'm still a little disappointed that we seem to be lagging behind many nations in the world when it comes to high-speed rail. And I'm sure Andy went on about that when he talked. Yeah. But I do think, one of the challenges that we have on our landscape, particularly here in North America, is just trying to find a dedicated funding source. So it's always a constant battle in terms of where's the money coming from. Obviously, the current administration has put an awful lot of money into transportation and rail transportation, and Amtrack got $22 billion of that. But it's a start, and that takes us to 2026. And so I think, for all of us, we need to have a little bit more confidence that isn't the end of the financing, but that's the beginning of the funding. So I think it's really important that as we get more and more urbanized, that we do actually start thinking more about what we want to do in terms of funding our transportation. We need a better understanding of where our ridership's going post-COVID. We've had some very interesting ridership trends here, where we've actually seen, leisure travel boom when perhaps business travel has declined slightly. Yeah. But, again, for lots of systems, particularly the Northeast Corridor, ridership is back and very, very strong, and maybe even stronger in some places than pre-COVID levels. So we've got an increasing urbanization. I'm not going to be, super mode bias. I think it's really important that we look at all modes. And so I would even say things like, BRT are things that we need to consider. Light rail obviously is picking up in a lot of our urban city areas, able to move people around. Austin in Texas right now has a project that they're looking at. Austin is a booming city here in Texas, USA, and definitely they need to think about how they can move people around the city. So I think light rail has a place. I think high-speed rail and urban rail has a place. I think that we shouldn't be biased and say that bus rapid transit has no place in our world. I think it does. I think we need to figure out how to be more multimodal and understand how these modes can actually interact with each other. And then even when we talk to the airlines, I think the airlines would be happy to ditched some of their short-haul routes for longer route slots or international slots. So I think everybody's really trying to pull in the right direction. It just needs to be a little bit more coordinated.
In your current role, I definitely think you have an opportunity to influence, especially within your current role as Vice President, Market Leader for Facilities and Fleet at Mott MacDonald. What are some strategic priorities you are focusing currently to address the evolving needs of the transportation industry?
Well, obviously, California high-speed rail in the U.S. has got a lot of newspaper space, or social media space, I should probably say. And so, we are very much involved in what's happening in California, and we're keeping an eye on that. California needs to be a success for the country. I think also things like Brightline, other high-speed rail operator potentially. Although it's a private entity, we want them to be successful. It's kind of raising all ships. But I think in my role, obviously high-speed rail is on my radar. Zero emission and decarbonization is very much on my radar. And that's both at the level of rail, but also I think from a facility point of view. So one of the things I personally would like to push a little more here at Mott MacDonald is our need to get more involved with facilities, because I see the facility transition is going to need to take place between being able to fuel from a diesel fossil fuel perspective to being able to fuel from maybe a hydrogen perspective. I think those are all transformations that we can help agencies look at. And we've got off to a good start. We've been working with San Bernardino County, and so we are part of the first hydrogen train set that will go into revenue service here in the US. So that's a start in the right direction.
Wow.
I also feel that there are opportunities in terms of things like how we go about sustainable power grids and backup power. Microgrids is something that always interests me, but how can an agency actually be more self-sufficient in terms of its power requirements and not have to necessarily rely so heavily on the local utility for its electricity?
Well, great insights, Norman. As a long-standing member of American Public Transportation Association, what do you believe are the most pressing policy and planning considerations for advancing public transit and railway systems in the coming years?
Well, I think we got to turn back to our politicians and our general public. We need to make sure that we're infusing the general public with regards to transportation and mobility. I've often said to people that being originally from England and traveling to the UK, one of my big frustrations has been standing in line in immigration and customs and listening to people coming back into the States saying, hey, I went to Spain while I was in London. I went to France. I got on the TGV. I had all these great experiences on high-speed rail. And I stand in line thinking you could have that here if you advocated for it. So I think we need to make sure that, one, we get the public excited about the possibilities and the benefits of public transit. I think we also need to work closely with our legislators to get them to understand the common good. It doesn't matter what their political persuasion is. And I think things like the bipartisan infrastructure bill was a great thing because it was bipartisan. So I feel like we've made some strides in that direction. I can't get away from the funding. We need a robust funding source that will keep us going for years to come. And so, I think that we as a transportation association and being a member of APTA, we've got quite a lot of lobbying to do of the right people, but I feel pretty good about the APTA leadership as well. And I think that they understand the importance of mobilizing all of our political allies to be able to stand up for transportation.
Oh, great insights, Norman. Funding is really vital. From your role, do you have any play in it? Can you influence in funding?
I think we can all influence the funding conversation, whether it's, as a professional in the industry, shall I say, or whether it's actually just as a member of the general public. We all have the opportunity to be able to write to our congressman or woman, and we have the opportunity to be able to kind of, write to our local politicians and say that, we want them to make this a priority.
Can you share some insights into your experience working with global original equipment manufacturers in the rail industry and how these collaborations contribute to innovation and project success?
Yeah, no, I feel, again, very privileged that my career has gone the way that it has. I started working in the UK for a company called Lucas Diesel Systems, and prior to that, Norgren Martinet, who sold solenoid valves to Wabtec and Westinghouse, and we were able to get involved in brakes. And then I worked with GE on electronic fuel injection systems. So there are many times when I sit in meetings with other consultants and I look around the room and I'm the only person who's actually built a rail car in the room. And that has been a tremendous experience, whether, as I say, it's been with GE or Super Steel or Colorado Rail Car. Those three experiences were really great. And so I think that I tend to be a little bit more empathetic when I'm sitting there as a consultant with my client toward railcar builders, in the sense that I understand the challenges that they have. But I think that just makes me a more collaborative partner. And I understand the challenges that they do have in terms of, schedule and parts and all those good things. But I think what that does for me too is, one, I could tell if they're trying to pull the wool over my eyes, but I think equally important, I can work with them and look at some workarounds for schedule and things like that, because I do think that it's really important for us to be able to sit in a room together and look at the problem together and all kind of pitch into the solution, as opposed to just sitting there and blaming each other and pointing fingers. So I do think I bring that to the table, and I do think that the railcar builders that I work with, they're appreciative of that insight. But I do think that we all have a challenge to be as innovative as we can. And innovation isn't just necessarily a new technology. Innovation can be, how do I shorten this schedule? How do we get back on the schedule? Those are all very important things as part of a program and a project.
Great insights, Norman. Finally, what advice would you offer to emerging professionals, because you're very keen in people management, aspiring to pursue a career in railway transportation systems and specifically project management?
No, again, I feel very lucky and privileged that through APTA, I am on the National Committee for our Emerging Leader Professionals Program within the APTA organization, and I'm also on the Young Professionals in Transportation International Board. So I'm very happy to be able to give back to the younger folks in our industry. It's really important that we grow that talent. But for them, I would always just say, seize every opportunity that comes your way. And I think in terms of things like you mentioned, your career in commissioning and testing, I think that is an absolutely great place to start life. And I used to say it's a great way to get your hands dirty, but these days we're all walking around with laptops. So I'm not necessarily sure you get your hands dirty these days, but I think if you can get involved in a testing program or a commissioning program, it just gives you a really great insight into how the equipment works. And just some of the people that you're around are just extremely knowledgeable subject matter experts. You're always going to learn from them. So I feel very lucky that early in my career I had that opportunity. We have a test center in Pueblo, Colorado that I've spent many, many hours walking around the kind of barren lands of Pueblo, Colorado test center, avoiding the snakes. But it was just a great, great experience and a great way to get involved with people who've been around the industry for a long time. So I would just say, while you're young, seize every opportunity that comes your way. If somebody says to you on Friday, can you be in Colorado on Tuesday, then give it some real serious thought, because you can be that flexible at times when you're a little younger. I would say also, do focus on any educational opportunities where you see some advancement and some progression. I think most companies are going to support you developing your skill set, as long as everybody feels like it's a win-win. I have mixed feelings about people getting project management qualifications, but I think if you're young, it's definitely something good to have on your resume. But I think it's important that we realize that, a qualification, while relevant, is not necessarily as good as the practical experience that you're going to get exposed to. So just keep trying to build your resume and network. I mean, there's nothing more important than interacting with others in the industry. And I think people would also be surprised. So I would say to anybody who's an emerging professional, don't be afraid to approach people. I've gone up to some fairly senior people in the industry and said, "Hey, will you mentor me?" And very much surprised that their instant reaction is absolutely. And I feel that way myself. So it doesn't matter whether you're a VP, senior VP, beginning of your career. I think if you go and approach somebody and ask them, "Can you help me?" I think they'll always say yes. I mean, it's one of those strange things as you progress through your career. Sometimes you feel that people are kind of nervous about approaching you, but we actually want you to approach us, and be involved in your exciting new career because you're the future. So I'm very much about helping people in that younger age bracket. I joke with them and say, if I'm nice to you, you'll give me my part-time job when I'm older.
Completely agree. Great advice and great thoughts. Thank you, Norman, for joining this pod and sharing your insights and knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I believe everyone listening to this podcast has got something to take away from today's discussion. If you like this podcast, please listen, follow, and share this podcast within your network. If you believe we should be sharing your story or someone within your network, there is a railway leader who should be here sharing his or her contribution to this industry, contact me on railway transportation systems at gmail.com. Thank you for your time today. See you next fortnight. Until then, stay safe and take care of yourself.